Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. It's October 13th, 1307, and the sun hasn't yet painted the sky over Paris. The city sleeps, but something is stirring in the darkness. Torches flicker against stone walls as hundreds of armed men move silently through empty streets. They know exactly where they're going, and they know exactly what they're looking for. But here's what they don't know. What would haunt kings and scholars for the next 700 years. They're about to discover that the most powerful treasure in medieval Europe has simply vanished into thin air. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this story tonight. Why should you care about something that happened so long ago? Well, what if I told you that this mystery connects to every adventure story you've ever loved? Every treasure hunt that's ever captured your imagination? What if the greatest mystery in history isn't buried in some distant past, but is still unfolding right now, waiting for someone like you to understand its secrets? Tonight, we're going to follow a trail that leads from the dusty roads of medieval Jerusalem to the misty highlands of Scotland, from the secret chambers beneath ancient churches to the mysterious islands of the New World. We're going to discover how 9 ordinary men became the most powerful organization in Europe, and how their disappearance created a mystery that still makes people dig holes in their backyards, still makes explorers sail to distant islands, still makes you wonder what secrets might be hidden in the world around you. But before we follow this treasure trail, before we uncover what happened to wealth that could buy entire kingdoms, you need to understand something important. The Knights Templar weren't just another group of medieval warriors. They were something far more fascinating, far more mysterious, and far more human than you might expect. They were people like you, people who made choices that changed everything, people who discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest decision to help someone else. Let me tell you how it all began, because every great mystery starts with people who had no idea they were about to change the world. Picture Jerusalem in the year 1119. The Crusades have been raging for 20 years, and the Holy Land is a dangerous place for anyone who doesn't carry a sword. Christian pilgrims travel thousands of miles to pray at the places where Jesus walked, but the roads are filled with bandits. The cities are unpredictable, and many of these faithful travelers never make it home to tell their families about their sacred journey. Now, imagine you're one of 9 French knights sitting around a campfire in this dangerous land, watching another group of pilgrims disappear into the night, not knowing if they'll survive until morning. What would you do? These 9 men made a choice that would echo through history. They decided to do something about it. They took vows that would bind them together forever, vows to protect the innocent, to serve God with their swords, and to guard the dangerous roads that led to Jerusalem. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, and at first, that's exactly what they were. Poor. They shared horses because they couldn't afford one each. They slept on stone floors and ate simple food. They owned nothing but their weapons and their faith. But here's where their story becomes extraordinary, where history takes a turn that still puzzles scholars today. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem offered them something that would change everything. He gave them quarters beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple itself. Think about that for a moment. Solomon's temple, the most sacred building in Jewish history, the place where the Ark of the Covenant once rested. Only shadows melting into darkness, where King Solomon himself once walked and prayed and kept the treasures of his kingdom. These 9 humble knights were now living in chambers that had been built over the foundations of the most legendary building in the ancient world. What do you think you would find if you could dig beneath a place like that? What do you think you would discover in rooms that had been sealed for centuries? The knights began to dig. They weren't just protecting pilgrims anymore. They were excavating, exploring, searching through ancient stones and forgotten chambers. And what they found down there, what they discovered in those dark spaces beneath Jerusalem, would transform them from 9 poor knights into the most powerful organization in medieval Europe. But here's the mystery that has kept treasure hunters awake for 700 years. What exactly did they find? The official records are strangely quiet about their discoveries. Medieval chroniclers, who usually wrote about everything, become vague and mysterious when they talk about the Templars' early years in Jerusalem. They hint at sacred relics, at ancient documents, at treasures beyond imagination. But they never quite say what these treasures were. It's as if they knew something too dangerous to write down, too powerful to speak about openly. What we do know is this: within just a few decades, donations poured in from across Europe. Kings gave them land, nobles gave them gold, and common people gave them everything they could spare. The church gave them privileges no other organization had ever received. They answered to no earthly authority except the Pope himself. They could cross any border. They paid no taxes, and they had their own courts, their own laws, their own fleet of ships. But here's what made them truly extraordinary. They invented something that would change the world forever. They created the first international banking system. A merchant in London could deposit gold with the Templars, travel to Jerusalem, and withdraw the same amount from a Templar treasury there. No need to carry heavy coins across dangerous roads. No need to worry about bandits or shipwrecks. The Templars had created a network of trust that spanned the known world. Picture their commanderies. Behind those thick stone walls, the Templars weren't just counting gold. They were lending money to kings, financing trade expeditions, and holding the debts of entire nations. They became so wealthy that they could fund crusades, build cathedrals, and loan money to the very monarchs who were supposed to rule them. They had become a power that rivaled kingdoms, a force that could make or break the fortunes of rulers. But wealth wasn't their only secret. The Templars were also guardians of knowledge that most people of their time could never imagine. They were scholars, architects, and keepers of ancient wisdom. They built some of the most magnificent churches in Europe, using mathematical principles and architectural techniques that seemed to come from nowhere. They studied languages that most Europeans had never heard of. They preserved texts that would have been lost forever, and they developed codes and symbols that still puzzle historians today. Some say they found the Holy Grail in those excavations beneath Solomon's temple. Others believe they discovered ancient scrolls that revealed hidden truths about Christianity. There are theories that they uncovered the Ark of the Covenant, that they found pieces of the true cross, that they discovered documents that would have shaken the foundations of medieval society. The truth is, we may never know exactly what they found, but we know that something down there transformed 9 poor knights into an organization that would dominate European politics for 200 years. And that's what makes their story so compelling, so mysteriously personal. These weren't mythical heroes or legendary figures. They were real people who made real choices, who discovered real secrets, who built real power. They were people who started with nothing and created something that would outlast kingdoms. They were people like you, people who decided to take action, to explore the unknown, to risk everything for something greater than themselves. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars grew stronger, richer, and more mysterious. They established commanderies from Scotland to the Holy Land, from Portugal to Poland. They commanded fleets that dominated Mediterranean trade. They built castles that controlled strategic routes. And they accumulated wealth that would make modern billionaires envious. They were the medieval equivalent of a multinational corporation, a military force, and a religious order, all rolled into one. But here's what made them dangerous to the people who feared them. They were independent. They didn't owe their loyalty to any king or nation. They served God. They served their own mysterious purposes, and they kept their secrets locked away behind stone walls and sacred vows. They had their own armies, their own treasuries, their own networks of loyal followers. They were a state within states, a power that could influence the rise and fall of dynasties. Medieval people whispered about their initiation ceremonies, conducted in absolute secrecy behind locked doors. They spoke of strange rituals, of sacred objects that new members had to kiss, of vows that bound brothers together in ways that seemed to go beyond ordinary religious devotion. They wondered about the Templars' real beliefs, their true mission, their ultimate goals. Were they protecting Christian pilgrims, or were they guarding something far more significant? The mystery deepened with every passing year. The Templars became more secretive, more powerful and more threatening to anyone who valued the traditional order of medieval society. They held the debts of kings, they controlled international trade routes, and they commanded the loyalty of thousands of trained warriors. They were rich enough to buy kingdoms, powerful enough to influence papal elections, and secretive enough to make everyone wonder what they were really planning. And then came the man who would change everything. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was exactly the kind of ruler who would see the Templars as a threat to his power. He was ambitious, he was ruthless, and most importantly, he was drowning in debt. Debt that he owed to the Templars. Debt that was crushing his kingdom's finances and limiting his ability to wage war, to build monuments, to project the kind of royal power that medieval kings needed to survive. Philip looked at the Templars' wealth and saw a solution to all his problems. He looked at their independence and saw a challenge to his authority. He looked at their secrets and saw an opportunity to destroy them. What if the most powerful military order in Europe simply disappeared? What if their wealth could be seized, their lands could be claimed, their secrets could be exposed? What if a king could solve his financial problems and eliminate his rivals in one brilliant, coordinated strike? The planning took months. Philip couldn't just attack the Templars openly. They were too powerful, too well-connected, too skilled in warfare. He needed a different approach, something that would justify their destruction and make their resistance impossible. He needed to brand them as enemies of God, as heretics, as dangerous criminals who deserved no mercy and no protection. Philip chose his date carefully. Friday, October 13th, 1307. A date that would become synonymous with bad luck, with betrayal, with the kind of coordinated treachery that could destroy even the mightiest organization. He prepared his accusations, charges, heresy, blasphemy, devil worship, sodomy, and denial of Christ. Charges that would make the Templars' destruction seem like a holy crusade rather than a political assassination. But here's where our treasure story really begins. Philip's plan required absolute secrecy and perfect timing. If the Templars suspected what was coming, if they had time to prepare, if they could move their wealth and escape his trap, then everything would fail. The operation had to be swift, complete, and devastating. Every Templar in France had to be arrested simultaneously before any of them could warn the others, before any of them could hide the evidence of their supposed crimes. The night of October 12th, 1307, royal soldiers moved through the darkness toward every Templar commandery in France. They carried sealed orders that wouldn't be opened until the moment of attack. They surrounded buildings, blocked roads, and waited for the signal that would begin one of the most dramatic raids in medieval history. At dawn, they would strike every Templar house at the same moment, arresting every knight, every sergeant, every servant who might know the secrets of the order. But something went wrong. Something that would create the greatest treasure mystery in history. When the soldiers broke down the doors of the Templar commanderies, when they searched the vaults and counting houses where the order kept its legendary wealth, they found something that shocked them more than any heretical ritual or blasphemous ceremony. They found empty rooms. They found detailed records of the Templars' financial transactions. They found maps and documents and religious artifacts. But they didn't find the gold. They didn't find the silver. They didn't find the treasure that was supposed to solve King Philip's financial problems. The wealth of the Knights Templar, accumulated over 2 centuries of donations and careful investment, had vanished overnight. Tons of gold and silver, chests full of precious stones, religious relics worth more than entire kingdoms, all gone. The Templars had somehow managed to hide the treasure of the medieval world in the few hours between Philip's decision to attack and the moment his soldiers broke down their doors. How do you hide wealth that could buy entire nations? How do you move tons of gold and silver without anyone noticing? How do you coordinate such a massive operation across multiple countries without leaving any trace that historians can follow? The mystery has haunted treasure hunters for 700 years. And tonight, we're going to follow the clues that they left behind. Some of the Templars were arrested that morning, including their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, who was captured under torture. Many of them confessed to the crimes they were accused of, though they later recanted their confessions when they realized they would die whether they confessed or not. But even under the most brutal interrogation, none of them revealed where the treasure had gone. They either didn't know, or they were willing to die rather than betray the secrets of their order. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered that the Templars had been preparing for this moment. They had advance warning of Philip's plan, possibly from sympathetic nobles or from their own network of informants. They had time to move their most valuable possessions, to hide their most important documents, to ensure that their real treasures would survive even if their organization was destroyed. But where would medieval monks hide treasures that could fill entire rooms? Where would they go with wagon loads of gold and silver? Where could they find safety in a world where every king was watching? Every rival was waiting for an opportunity to seize their wealth. The answer, according to the legends and theories that have grown around the Templars' disappearance, is that they didn't hide their treasure in one place. They scattered it across the medieval world, creating a network of secret caches that would keep their wealth safe until the day when their order could be restored. The first trail leads north to the misty highlands of Scotland. In 1314, 7 years after the Templars' arrest, Robert the Bruce was fighting for Scottish independence against Edward II of England. The Battle of Bannockburn would determine whether Scotland would remain free or fall under English rule. According to legend, a group of mysterious knights appeared at the crucial moment of the battle, charging into the English ranks with a ferocity that turned the tide of combat. These knights wore no identifying symbols. They answered to no earthly lord, and they disappeared as mysteriously as they had arrived. Some historians believe these mysterious warriors were Templar refugees, knights who had escaped Philip's trap and found sanctuary in Scotland. They brought with them more than just their military skills. They brought knowledge of architecture, of finance, of engineering that would help Scotland develop into a modern nation. And they brought something else, something that would create one of the most persistent treasure legends in history. The Sinclair family of Scotland became the guardians of mysterious knowledge after the Templars' disappearance. In the 15th century, they built Rosslyn Chapel, a small but extraordinarily detailed church that is covered with symbols and carvings that seem to tell a story about hidden wisdom and sacred geometry. The chapel contains images of plants that didn't exist in Europe at the time it was built, architectural elements that seem to reference traditions from the Middle East, and stone carvings that appear to show Templar knights in procession. But Rosslyn Chapel isn't just a building. According to legend, it's a marker, a sign that points to something hidden beneath the Scottish countryside. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed chambers beneath the chapel, sealed vaults that the Sinclair family has never opened. Local legends speak of a treasure that lies waiting beneath the church, a treasure that includes not just gold and silver, but sacred relics and ancient documents that would rewrite the history of Christianity. The mystery of Rosslyn Chapel connects to a larger theory about the Templars' treasure. A theory that suggests they didn't just hide their wealth in Scotland. They used it. They used their gold to fund explorations, to finance expeditions, to discover new lands where they could establish colonies free from the interference of European kings. And this brings us to one of the most intriguing possibilities in the entire Templar mystery. What if the Knights Templar discovered America 200 years before Columbus? What if their treasure didn't disappear into hidden vaults, but was invested in the greatest adventure of the medieval age? The evidence for this theory comes from the most unlikely place imaginable, a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia called Oak Island. Oak Island has been the site of treasure hunting for over 200 years. The island contains a mysterious shaft known as the Money Pit that seems to have been deliberately constructed to hide something valuable. The pit is protected by a series of flood traps that fill it with water whenever someone tries to dig too deep. It contains layers of logs, stones, and clay that suggests centuries of careful engineering. And most intriguingly, it has yielded artifacts that seem to come from medieval Europe. Excavations on Oak Island have uncovered fragments of parchment, pieces of metal that appear to be from medieval armor, and stones with strange symbols carved into them. Carbon dating suggests that some of these artifacts are from the 14th century, exactly the time when the Templars were fleeing persecution in Europe. The island's flood traps use engineering techniques that were known to medieval builders, and the construction of the money pit required a level of organization and resources that only a wealthy organization like the Templars could have provided. But Oak Island isn't the only evidence for a Templar presence in North America. Stone carvings with symbols that appear to be Templar crosses. This stone structure was long thought to be a windmill built by colonial settlers, but recent archaeological evidence suggests it's much older. The tower's construction techniques are consistent with medieval European building methods, and its alignment seems to be based on astronomical principles that were known to the Templars. Radiocarbon dating of mortar samples suggests the tower was built in the 14th century, decades before any acknowledged European settlement in North America. If the Templars did reach North America, it would explain not just where they established colonies in the New World, colonies that would preserve their knowledge and their traditions until the day when it might be safe to return to Europe. But not all of the Templars' treasure made it to America. Some of it stayed much closer to home, hidden in ways that were so clever, so obvious that they've remained secret for 700 years. The second major trail leads to Portugal, where the Templars' disappearance became a transformation rather than a destruction. King Dinis of Portugal was one of the few European monarchs who refused to persecute the Templars. Instead of arresting them, he negotiated with the Pope to create a new organization that would inherit the Templars' property and continue their mission. The Order of Christ, as it was called, was essentially the Knights Templar under a different name. The same knights, the same castles, the same mission, but with papal approval and royal protection. Prince Henry the Navigator, one of the most important figures in the Age of Discovery, was a Grand Master of the Order of Christ. The ships that he sent to explore the African coast, the expeditions that opened the sea route to India, the discoveries that made Portugal one of the richest nations in Europe. All of these were funded by the wealth that the Templars had accumulated over 2 centuries. The Order of Christ's Cross, a modified version of the Templar Cross, was painted on the sails of Portuguese ships that reached Brazil, India, and China. This Portuguese connection suggests that the Templars' treasure wasn't just hidden. It was actively used to fund the explorations that would reshape the world. The Age of Discovery, the colonization of the Americas, the establishment of global trade networks. All of these developments were made possible by the wealth that the Templars had accumulated in their role as medieval bankers and international traders. But there's another possibility, one that brings the treasure trail much closer to home. What if the Templars' wealth never left Europe at all? What if it was simply transformed, invested in institutions that would preserve it for centuries, without anyone recognizing its true origin? This theory leads us to the mountains of Switzerland, to the birth of the banking system that still dominates international finance today. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. The Templars are arrested in 1307. Their wealth disappears, and within a few decades, Swiss banking families begin to emerge as major players in European finance. The Templars had invented international banking. They had established the networks and techniques that made global finance possible, and they had trained generations of skilled financial administrators. When their order was dissolved, these skills and resources didn't simply vanish. They were transferred to new institutions, new organizations that could continue the Templars' financial mission under different names. Some of the oldest Swiss banking families have names that can be traced back to Templar connections. The techniques they use for moving money across borders, for maintaining secrecy, for protecting their clients' identities, are remarkably similar to the methods that the Templars developed in their role as medieval bankers. The Swiss banking system's emphasis on neutrality, on staying above the political conflicts that destroy other nations, echoes the Templars' original mission to serve God rather than any earthly ruler. If this theory is correct, then the Templars' treasure isn't hidden in some remote castle or buried on some mysterious island. It's still working, still growing, still influencing the world economy through institutions that have preserved the Templars' financial legacy for 7 centuries. The treasure isn't gold sitting in vaults. It's a system of knowledge and relationships that continues to generate wealth and power for the people who understand how to use it. But the mystery doesn't end with banks and financial systems. There's a spiritual dimension to the Templar treasure that goes far beyond gold and silver, far beyond anything that could be measured in coins or counted in vaults. Some of the most persistent legends about the Templars suggest that their real treasure was knowledge, wisdom, spiritual insight that they discovered in their excavations beneath Solomon's temple. The Holy Grail is the most famous of these spiritual treasures. According to legend, the Grail was the cup that caught the blood of Christ when he was crucified, the vessel that gave eternal life to anyone who drank from it. The Templars were said to be the guardians of this most sacred relic, the protectors of an object that represented the ultimate union between human and divine. But what if the Grail isn't a physical object at all? What if it's a metaphor for spiritual knowledge, for the kind of wisdom that transforms ordinary people into something extraordinary? The Templars' rapid rise from poverty to power, their ability to inspire absolute loyalty, their mysterious rituals and secret ceremonies. All of these suggest that they had access to something that went far beyond ordinary religious instruction. Medieval accounts of Templar initiation ceremonies describe rituals that seem designed to create a psychological transformation in new members. Candidates were required to spend hours in meditation, to confront their deepest fears, to surrender their individual identity to the collective mission of the order. They were shown sacred objects, taught secret words, and introduced to mysteries that were said to reveal the true nature of reality. These ceremonies bear a striking resemblance to initiation rituals that have been used by mystery schools throughout history, from the ancient Egyptian temples to the Greek mystery cults to the secret societies of the Renaissance. The Templars may have preserved ancient wisdom traditions that had been lost to mainstream Christianity, knowledge that allowed them to achieve states of consciousness that ordinary people could barely imagine. This spiritual interpretation of the Templar treasure suggests that what they found beneath Solomon's temple wasn't just gold and silver, but texts and artifacts that preserved the inner teachings of Judaism and early Christianity. Documents that revealed the esoteric meaning behind familiar religious symbols, practices that allowed direct experience of divine reality, wisdom that could transform human consciousness itself. If this theory is correct, then the Templars' real treasure is still available to anyone who knows how to look for it. It's preserved in the symbols they carved into their buildings, in the architectural principles they used to design their churches, in the mathematical relationships they embedded in their sacred geometry. The treasure isn't hidden in some remote location. It's encoded in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right knowledge to decode its secrets. Modern researchers have found evidence that the Templars were skilled in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering techniques that were supposedly unknown in medieval Europe. They built churches that align with astronomical phenomena. They used proportions in their architecture that seem to be based on advanced mathematical principles. And they created art that contains symbols and references that point to knowledge systems that weren't officially recognized by the medieval church. The most famous example of this hidden knowledge is the cathedral at Chartres in France. Although it wasn't built by the Templars directly, it was constructed during the height of their power, and it contains architectural elements that seem to reference their symbols and beliefs. The cathedral's labyrinth, its rose windows, its mathematical proportions, all of these suggest that the builders had access to knowledge that went far beyond conventional medieval education. But you don't need to visit ancient cathedrals to find evidence of the Templars' spiritual legacy. Their influence can be seen in the secret societies that emerged after their dissolution, in the Freemasons, who preserved their symbols and rituals, in the Rosicrucians, who continued their studies of ancient wisdom, in the various esoteric traditions that have maintained the idea that true knowledge must be hidden from the masses and revealed only to those who are properly prepared to receive it. The question that haunts everyone who studies the Templar mystery is this: why are we still looking? Why, after 700 years, do people still believe that there's something to find? Why do archaeologists still excavate Templar sites? Why do treasure hunters still dig holes in Scottish hillsides? Why do historians still debate theories about hidden gold and secret knowledge? The answer, I think, is that the Templars represent something that we've lost in our modern world. They represent the possibility that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things, that small groups of dedicated individuals can change the course of history, that there are still mysteries in the world that haven't been solved by technology and bureaucracy. They represent the idea that the most valuable treasures aren't the ones that can be bought and sold, but the ones that transform the people who find them. They point out that medieval record-keeping was incomplete, that the Templars' wealth was probably exaggerated, that their treasure was most likely spent on legal defenses and bribes during their years of persecution. They suggest that the mystery is bigger than the reality, that our fascination with the Templars says more about our own desires than about medieval history. But the conspiracy theorists see something deeper. They believe that the Templars' disappearance was part of a larger plan, that their treasure was used to fund secret societies that continue to influence world events to this day. They point to the connections between Templar symbols and modern organizations, to the persistence of certain names and bloodlines, to the ways that power and wealth seem to flow through hidden channels that the general public never sees. The Freemasons openly acknowledge their connection to the Templars, using similar symbols and rituals, preserving traditions that they claim date back to the medieval period. The Rosicrucians maintain that they are the inheritors of ancient wisdom that the Templars discovered and preserved. Various other secret societies claim to be the true continuation of the Templar mission, the guardians of knowledge that is too dangerous or too powerful to be shared with the uninitiated. Some theorists believe that the Vatican itself is the ultimate repository of Templar treasures, that the Church's secret archives contain documents and artifacts that would revolutionize our understanding of Christianity if they were ever made public. They point to the Church's role in the Templars' persecution, suggesting that the Pope's decision to dissolve the order was motivated by a desire to seize their spiritual treasures, rather than to punish their supposed crimes. Others believe that the treasure is connected to bloodline mysteries, to the idea that certain families have preserved not just Templar wealth, but Templar knowledge, passing it down through generations of carefully selected heirs. These theories often connect to larger conspiracies about secret rulers, hidden powers, and the manipulation of world events by groups that operate beyond the reach of normal political and economic systems. The spiritual interpretation of the Templar treasure takes a different approach entirely. Instead of focusing on hidden gold or secret conspiracies, it suggests that the real treasure is available to anyone who is willing to undertake the inner journey that the Templars themselves experienced. The treasure isn't something that can be possessed or controlled. It's a state of consciousness, a way of understanding reality that transforms the person who achieves it. This interpretation connects the Templar mystery to the broader human search for meaning, for purpose, for connection to something greater than individual existence. The treasure becomes a metaphor for enlightenment, for the kind of wisdom that allows people to transcend their ordinary limitations and achieve their highest potential. It's not hidden in some remote location. It's hidden within human consciousness itself, waiting to be discovered by anyone who has the courage to look. Technology keeps revealing new possibilities for solving the Templar mystery. Ground-penetrating radar has identified chambers beneath Templar sites that have never been opened. Satellite imagery has revealed the remains of structures that might be connected to Templar settlements. Digital analysis of medieval documents has uncovered references and connections that previous generations of scholars missed. Recent archaeological discoveries have found Templar artifacts in unexpected places, from the Americas to the Far East. Chemical analysis of medieval coins has revealed trade connections that suggest the Templars had a global reach that historians are only beginning to understand. DNA analysis of remains found at Templar sites has provided clues about the ethnic origins and family connections of the Knights themselves. But perhaps the most significant discovery is the realization that the Templars' real legacy isn't their treasure at all. It's the ideas they preserved, the systems they created, the possibilities they opened up for human organization and achievement. They showed that small groups of dedicated people could create institutions that would outlast kingdoms. They demonstrated that wealth and power could be used to serve higher purposes than personal enrichment. They proved that secrecy and mystery could be tools for preservation. Rather, the international banking system that dominates modern finance is based on principles that the Templars developed. The idea of credit, of trust-based transactions, of money that exists as information rather than as physical objects. All of these concepts can be traced back to the innovations that the Templars made in their role as medieval bankers. The treasure they left behind isn't gold and silver. It's the economic system that makes modern civilization possible. The architectural techniques that the Templars used to build their churches influenced the development of Gothic architecture, which in turn influenced the design of buildings that we still use today. The mathematical principles they employed in their sacred geometry contributed to the development of engineering and construction techniques that are still being refined and improved. The treasure they left behind isn't hidden in secret vaults. It's built into the structures that surround us every day. The organizational methods that the Templars developed to manage their international network influenced the creation of modern corporations, of international law, of diplomatic protocols that allow different nations to work together despite their differences. The treasure they left behind isn't conspiracy and secrecy. It's the institutional framework that makes global cooperation possible. As you think about the Templar mystery tonight, as you consider the possibilities and theories that have captivated people for 7 centuries, remember that you're part of a tradition that goes back to the very beginning of the story. Medieval people went to sleep wondering about the same questions that keep us awake today. They looked at the ruins of Templar commanderies and wondered what secrets those walls had witnessed. They examined Templar symbols and tried to decode their hidden meanings. They dreamed of finding the treasure that would solve all their problems and transform their lives. The beautiful truth about the Templar mystery is that it's not really about the past at all. It's about the present, about the possibilities that exist in your own life, about the choices that you make every day that could potentially change everything. The 9 knights who started the Templar Order didn't know they were creating a legend. They were just responding to a need they saw in the world around them. They were ordinary people who decided to do something extraordinary, and their decision echoed through history in ways they could never have imagined. What need do you see in the world around you? What injustice makes you angry? What problem keeps you awake at night? What possibility excites you enough to risk everything for its achievement? The Templars' real treasure might be the example they set, the proof that individuals can make a difference, that small groups of committed people can change the world, that the most valuable discoveries often come from the willingness to explore the unknown. The mystery continues because each generation discovers new clues, new possibilities, new ways of understanding the evidence that previous generations left behind. The Templar's story isn't finished because their legacy is still unfolding, still influencing the world, still inspiring people to search for something greater than themselves. The treasure isn't hidden in some remote location, waiting to be discovered by archaeologists or treasure hunters. It's active in the world, working through institutions and ideas, and individuals who carry forward the mission that those 9 knights began in Jerusalem nearly 900 years ago. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't what happened to the Templars' gold, but what happened to their vision, their dedication, their willingness to sacrifice everything for something they believed in. Perhaps the real treasure is the reminder that such dedication is possible, that such sacrifice is meaningful, that such vision can still transform the world if someone is willing to embrace it. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let these stories settle into your imagination. Remember that you're connected to something larger than yourself, something that has been unfolding for centuries and will continue long after you're gone. The Templars' treasure isn't just gold and silver hidden in ancient vaults. It's the inspiration they provide, the questions they raise, the possibilities they represent. It's the reminder that the greatest adventures are still ahead of us, that the most important treasures are still waiting to be discovered, and that the most meaningful quests are the ones that transform the people who undertake them. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in this world, ancient mysteries are still unfolding, still revealing new secrets, still calling to people who are brave enough to seek them. And perhaps in your dreams, you'll find yourself walking through torch-lit corridors beneath Solomon's temple, or standing on the deck of a ship, sailing toward unknown shores, or opening a door that has been sealed for 700 years, discovering at last the treasure that the Knights Templar left behind for someone exactly like you to find. The mystery continues, and you are part of it. Sweet dreams, fellow seeker. The greatest treasures are always found by